Interesting. I mean, people who argue in India that I am a son of the soil, I am a Moolvasi, people forget the great Indian sociologist M.N. Srinivas once wrote that India is a country of immigrants. Everybody is an immigrant. Who is an original inhabitant? Nobody knows. In fact, we are all immigrants in this country called India. So I was very, very delighted to meet Professor Dimri. And I was telling him that some years ago, I went to Nainital. And I discovered in Nainital, I'm used to castes like Brahman, Thakur, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, Yadav. Suddenly in Nainital, I discovered there is a caste called Karnataka. Because many years ago, a lot of people from Karnataka had migrated to Nainital. And in the time-tested Indian tradition, they all became a caste after 100 years. So this caste became a Karnataka caste. So a remarkable story about India. But I am delighted that you are celebrating Earth Day. Today's Earth Day is special because a couple of hours from now in New York, many countries will actually be signing up to the Paris Climate Accord. So this year's Earth Day is more than a ritual. It's actually got some practical significance that many countries, including the United States, China, India, Brazil, all the big countries, will sign up to the Paris Agreement, which is the first step. It's not by no means it's the final step, but it's the first step towards managing global warming. Now, I want to say a couple of things on JNU's Environmental Sciences program. The JNU's program is not on environmental studies, it's on environmental sciences. Very important. Many years ago, the founders of JNU realized that matters relating to the environment are profoundly connected with science. And that's why it's the School of Environmental Sciences. Many universities have School of Environmental Studies. But very few universities I know of in India and abroad have School of Environmental Sciences, because fundamentally what we really observe is the interface between science and society, between science and human activity when it comes to environmental issues. In fact, in 1995, three chemists, including the great Michael Molina, a Mexican scientist, got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for discovering the depletion of the ozone layer. And this is, an interplay of science with an environmental issue. And in 2007, you know that the IPCC got the Nobel Prize as an organization for the work that it did on climate change. So another example of the interface between science and society. So I want to congratulate JNU, and I want to make a special plea that it should be kept this way. That there is a place for environmental activism, there is a place for environmental politics, there is a place for environmental economics, but fundamentally the anchor must be environmental science. Whether we are studying the atmosphere, whether we are studying the oceans, whether we are studying climate, whether we are studying the depletion of the ozone layer, whatever the planetary boundary that we are studying, let us not forget the foundation has to be in science. Now, what do we do with that science? How that science is used for environmental policies is a different issue. But I think the fundamental requirement is science. And when I was the Minister for Environment, for example, I started a program in the ministry called the National Environmental Sciences Fellows Program. Basically, to get young postdoctoral researchers involved and interested in environmental issues. Because India has a lot of environmental activists. India has a lot of environmental economists. India has a lot of environmental politicians. But India has very few environmental scientists. People who study the environment as a scientific system, without politics, without preconceived notions and biases. And that's what we need, and I'm sure that the Institute, JNU, the JNU is in the headlines very often for the wrong reasons. It never comes into the headline for the good reasons. There's a lot of good science that takes place in this institution, and when I was a minister, I depended a lot on the School of Environmental Sciences, so particularly on wetlands, for example, is an example in which I made considerable use of the expertise that exists in this institution. So I want to congratulate you, and I want to request Professor Joshi, Professor Dimri, and all the others to keep it this way, to keep the flag of environmental science flying, because good science will automatically lead to good policy. Unfortunately, in our country, we often look at policy without its scientific anchor. We must always be careful. We must always be mindful of the science that we understand. Some years ago, again, when I was the minister, suddenly I discovered a report which said that the Himalayan glaciers will vanish by the year 2035. So I said, wait a minute. How can this be? Himalayan glaciers, 10,000 glaciers will vanish by the year 2035. It can't be. I mean, is there some science to this? So I caught hold of a number of Indian scientists and I said, look, please educate me. I am a layman. Please educate me. Tell me, how will Himalayan glaciers be extinct by the year 2035? So they spent 3 months and they came back to me and said, sir, that is an error. Himalayan glaciers are under retreat, but they are not going to vanish like the IPCC says by the year 2035. And you may know there was a big controversy and the IPCC, I challenged the IPCC. Dr. Pachauri did not agree with what I had to say, but finally he had to back down. And a lot of Indian scientists who had worked in the Geological Survey of India and other institutions, the GB Pant Institute at Almora and other such institutes, they finally were vindicated, and India's stand was vindicated. The point I want to make is, good climate politics requires good climate science. Good climate economics requires good climate science. So it's the scientific basis, and I hope all of you, whatever your environmental inclinations may be, as activists and as citizens, you will not forget your scientific base, and I think that's very, very important. Well, I don't want to say too much. The climate change has been alluded to earlier in the day, and today, as you all know, in New York, all the countries are going to take the first step. For India, it's particularly important because we face maximum vulnerabilities to climate change. We may not have contributed to global warming. We contribute only about 6% of global greenhouse gas emissions, compared to China 29%, compared to America, which is about 16%, compared to Europe, which is about 11%. But in terms of vulnerability, no country is as vulnerable to climate change as India is. Look at the monsoon, our dependence on the monsoon. Look at our dependence on the glaciers for water security. Look at our dependence on forests for natural resources and for daily livelihoods. And look at the number of people living along the coastline, the 7,500 kilometer long coastline. So no country in the world has so much of vulnerability to global warming and the uncertainties of climate change that India has, and therefore India has to be a world leader. India has made certain commitments as part of the Paris Agreement. That's a beginning, that's a first step. But as we move ahead, as we go along, I'm sure that we will have to review our position and we will have to take much more meaningful action in order to ensure that we don't cause global warming. We may not have historically contributed to global warming, but in the next 15 years or so, India's contribution will be very significant. Today we are the 4th largest emitter. By the year 2030, we will be the second largest emitter because of our rate of economic growth being what it is. So historically, we may not have been part of the problem, but in future, we'll certainly be part of the problem, and people's, the world's eyes will be on India. So without wishing to say too much more, I want to wish all the young scholars here all the very best. I think you are in an outstanding institution. Please make full use of the facilities that this institution provides. Please publish. This is very important. This publish or perish is a syndrome, but unfortunately in India, academics would rather perish than publish. The name of the game in today's world is you must publish your research. You must get your research out into the public domain. And only then will you get noticed. Only then will these scientific results result in some meaningful policy actions. So please be scientifically robust. Please ensure that what you study, what you analyze, does get published. And there is no alternative to peer review publications. You have to get reviewed, you have to get published in peer review publications, and you will see that that will have an impact on the positions that we take. So in the years to come, I think environment is going to be a big issue for India. It's going to be a big public health issue. It's going to be a big political issue. It's going to be a big economic issue. And therefore, the work that you are going to be doing is going to be very, very significant. So environment, I think economic growth, everybody knows that we need fast economic growth, but I think most people are recognizing that we need faster economic growth with environmental protection, with environmental conservation. So how do we use environmental science to generate not just economic growth, which we need to generate employment, but also to protect our natural resources, to protect water, protect our air, protect our mountains, protect our rivers, and protect our forests. So once again, let me congratulate the two professors, let me congratulate all the young scholars, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll just like to make a remark, as Joshi sir previously said, that Jairam sir is not only the most good politician in India, but also the most handsome. So I'd just like to say that, sir, you have also done many handsome things, and handsome actually is what handsome does. Sir, thank you so much for giving us the opportunities that you told us that you set up many things for the postdoc and PhD people of environment.